Hi and welcome. This is Isam from ISD Architects. In this video I'm going to talk about the best practice in design. If you remember the last video, we talked about the difference or the comparison between the best practice and the common practice. Unfortunately, nowadays it's a common practice. Everybody talks about it is the common practice in this industry, it's common practice in that industry. But we endeavor at ISD Architects not to limit the design into the common practice, because obviously with the crisis of the environment, the crisis of the quality of design, and the hardness that, or the hardship that the clients and the owners are facing on their budgets and on the building performance on the short and long run, are all playing into pushing the architects, pushing the designers into become their best, into giving their best to the owners and to the environment, to nature. So in this video I'm going to talk about the difference between the best practice and the common practice, and how we can approach good design practice, or how can we improve our performance, whether we are owners of buildings, owners of small homes, residential building. It doesn't really matter. Any project, any addition to the building, whether it's a small addition or a large addition like an office building or multi-residential unit buildings, the 10-15 story height, or the smaller projects, they all have the same design principles. Now, there are three things that I would like to talk about due to the limitation of time. Now, as you know, the design stage, it starts with the location of the building. Now, don't be confused if you say, I don't have a new construction, I don't have a new building. All I want to do is probably just add an addition or an annex to the building, or a top up the building, like building a second story to your home. So let's assume that you have a building that is located on a site, and normally there is a sun movement around the house. Well, actually this is a wrong expression. It is actually the earth that rotates around the sun. But theoretically speaking, to make things easier, there is a sun path that architects and designers draw. If this is the east and this is the west, then again theoretically the sun rises. It's actually the earth rotates towards the west, so the sun rises, and as the day moves on, the sun changes location vis-a-vis the building. So this process, or this phenomenon, causes shadows to be casted on the ground in front of the building. Now, this is a tall building. We have a more serious problems, because the shadow will come all the way down to cover probably some other buildings or some neighboring properties. So as the sun changes, for example, this is, let's say it's at 11 a.m. so the shading will come to this limit. At midday probably the shading will change into somewhere here, and so on and so forth. The shading will change around the building according to the sun location. But as summer comes, the sun would be more vertical to the building itself, which means that the shadows it casts on the site would be much less than the winter time. Now there are benefits we all know from probably tuition or from experience that shading in the summertime is more favorable because the heat that comes through the solar radiation or the sun radiation is more than what we can enjoy, and this is what we call the comfort zone, which is between, roughly speaking, between 18 degrees Celsius and 24 degrees Celsius in the summertime. The comfort zone changes according to the season. So the most surface that gets the heat from the sun is the roof, and then the walls that face the sun from the other side. So these walls, basically the southern wall, the south, and the east and the west. These are the walls, and the north one keeps in shading almost all of the day, except for probably when the sun rises. It takes a glimpse, so to speak, of the sun, and when the sun sets, it also hits the north elevation a little bit. So we can consider that the north elevation is devoid of any sun radiation. So any design that avoid to tackle these issues, and again I say, if you are building a second story to this building and you put all your windows, for example, to the north, of course I'm kind of negating the other site planning issues like what the city or what the municipality would allow you, but let's say we would skip the environmental impact of the sun movement. Then all our windows would be to the north, for example, and we forget that this is a southern wall that could heat the building, especially the interior of the building, during the mostly needed time, which is the winter time, especially in the cold climates. So these decisions can only come from knowledge and from being competent in knowing how we interact, how the building interacts with the environment. The other aspect, so we move from this probably to a more realistic or architectural kind of solution, which is basically, then if we are building a new building, then we can configure our building to be exposed to the southern orientation as maximum as possible in the cold climates, while trying to keep the building shape and configuration as simple as possible. Now the reason I drew this is only schematic. It could be any other form. I am trying here to maximize the surfaces in a cold climate that faces the sun and absorbs the sun radiation, which makes the interiors of the building more pleasant due to the fact that the sun warmth will be retained inside the building. Of course, there are other elements I won't be touching upon at this video, but the type of window that you use, which permits the sun radiation to come in, but it doesn't allow it to go out, and kind of preserve it inside so that it could be more useful, versus getting the sun inside the building and then allowing it to allowing the heat, I mean, to leave the building fast. That is not the best practice in design as well. So from the first analysis, we kind of starting to understand what is the best form, whether you're adding, for example, if you're not building something really large, or you have a limited budget and then you're trying to renovate your kitchen. So let's assume that this is your kitchen, and let's assume that you have a small window here, another window here, and then you're trying to renovate that kitchen in order to make it more contemporary, more beautiful, but you skip the fact that you needed more sun to come in here to make the environment inside the house, or the microenvironment, I should say, inside the house more pleasant. This solution, for example, to open up more towards the west, or to add a deck more to the to the south, would be a very good design decision, versus if you have a chance to open up here towards the east, then the eastern sun, again I'll draw that, the eastern sun would hit that window in the probably wrong timing. That's first of all. Second of all, it will be on a low angle, so rather than enjoying the sun coming that way, would allow us also to have overhangs or shading devices that will prevent the sun from coming through the space in the summertime, which we don't need. Then the eastern sun would be kind of invading us without any ability from our side to control it, other than putting blinds. Of course, putting blinds is also possible. In the worst case scenario, we can use that, but naturally, if we put shading devices like these, or we put awnings, for example, on the southern elevation, it would be very beneficial, because I'll explain that in a section. If we have our kitchen like that, and this is our window, so the sun in the summer would be more vertical, so the window would be shaded. The sun in the winter, if you remember the graph I drew first, it would be penetrating the kitchen area and then making a nice microclimate where these surfaces would get more heat during the afternoons, let's say from midday till 4, and then those surfaces will be heated, and then they will start to transferring the heat during the colder times of the day. So this is the second aspect of a good design, or a good start of the design, where we took our understanding of the sun and its movement in a certain location, and then we translate that into windows. Many people put the windows haphazard. I'm sorry to say that. Many, even architects and designers, just put them because they think it will look cool on the mass, and on the perspective it looks nice, but really the impact of a window, or they call it a fenestration, or a puncture in the wall, this has an impact on how much heat you're gaining, how much heat you're losing if it's a winter time, and how much money it costs you to heat the space, reheat the space, or to cool the space in the summertime. Now the third aspect is the detailing. According to the criteria that we talked about, the south, the west, the east, and the north, the wall itself could be designed differently if it's not getting the heat that, for instance, in hot climates, we can have a thicker wall here in order to kind of hinder the sun from coming through, or we create what we call a thermal mass, where the wall will get warmer slower than, say, a metal wall, where it gets hot very fast and gets cold very fast. So in hot areas, or more moderate areas, different design strategies for what we call the building envelope would be influenced, I would say, by knowing how the sun behaves, or how the earth rotates, and change the location of the sun. So this wall, for example, I talked about, you know, how many windows we have here versus here, and it's also always preferable to have a southern oriented window versus west or east. And the fact is obvious, we want to minimize the impact of the sun during those times. In the summer it will be very severe in the west, and in the winter it would be very annoying as well, because it doesn't come at an angle that is comfortable. So you tend to draw the curtain, but then when you draw the curtain there is heat coming through, but the heat is blocked by the curtains or drapery or any sort of shading. So as you can see, sorry, I wanted to draw one last detail. If we take the southern window, the southern wall, for example, then we can, as I said, we can have it designed as such as to have, for example, brick, and then we have other layers of the window, and probably we have some insulation. Now the brick is known to be a thermal mass that will absorb the heat very slowly and then emits it to the inside. So that will kind of make the whole structure warmer much slower, that by the end of the day, during the night time, the wall itself become warmer than the room temperature and starts to radiate the heat from the wall mass itself to the interior. In the other areas where you have the walls, for example, facing north, then it is preferable to have to design glazed wall if there was there's a good view, or we could have windows for certain functions. And here we can, because we are facing north, we don't have any source of heat, then the window type itself would have to be considered very carefully. For example, triple pane window would be advisable in order to minimize the heat loss through the window itself to the outside. So if this is a night time and this is warm and this is cold, then the heat tends to go out very quickly if the window type, or what we call it, the U value of the window conductance of the pane, of the pane and frame would be very high, then the resistance would be very low. So all these factors come from the fact that you locate your building or your project or your kitchen windows or your deck. Doesn't matter really the size of the project. It does matter, and to make the common practice into best practice, it does matter that you know how your building interacts with the site. If you have any vegetation, if that vegetation is coniferous or deciduous, meaning if it sheds the leaves during the winter time or it keeps it, because in this case you'd understand that the sun will not be blocked. If you have a deciduous tree in front of a summer orientation, then it is the best, because you're blocking the summer sun, which is not quite preferable because of the massive heat it gets into the building, and then you allow that into the building during the winter time where the leaves are all gone, and then the ability of the sun to warm the spaces inside the house or the second story or the building itself would be much easier. I would like to stress these practices. In the coming videos we will talk more about best practices in design, but I thought of starting from the more strategic decision, which is the location, orientation, understanding the behavior of the sun throughout the year, so an architect or a designer, or even if you are doing the project yourself, you can visualize what these windows or fenestrations mean to your spaces in order to create beautiful environment and also energy efficient spaces. After all, the budget can be divided into the first budget, or the principal budget, or the initial budget, and the running cost or the running budget in order to heat the spaces or cool the spaces or maintain the spaces if there is any problem due to moisture, due to any construction deficiencies. But this is another issue that, you know, it's not the focus of our video for today. But what I'm trying to say is that when you design the building, taking all these considerations into account, then the chances that your design would be very efficient are much higher, because you'd make use of the sun as a source of heat, especially in cold winters. Also, you'll make use of your design in order to avoid the sun during the hot summers, especially in areas where the sun or the summers are very hot or extremely hot. There's also the fact that there is a fluctuation of temperatures. For example, if it's an arid or a desert-like environment versus humid environment, you know, cities and towns along the coast, for example, tend to be milder, and the fluctuation of temperatures between these two would be much less. At the end of the day, I need to say, and probably most of you know, that the environment is suffering, and there is a very huge pressure from the building industry on the environment in terms of, you know, cooling and heating, and the fact that we still use fossil fuel to heat and cool the buildings, like air conditioning, especially in areas where it has long summers and hot summers. And these costs, they are not only money, they are actually consumption of energy. That means it's based on the fossil fuel. It's based on diminishing resources, not renewable resources. And that's why we tend to have the sun as a renewable resource. And we have to go back to thousands of years of design and learn from the masters of design, whether on a small scale or on an urban scale or even on a city level scale. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please press the button below, press the like button below if you like it, or press the thumbs down if you didn't like it. Or if you have any questions, by all means send me an email to isd@isdarchitects.com, and I'll be able, so I can be able to answer you. Any design question would be welcome, or any construction question would also be welcome. Please also click on the link below, because we have a free report that talks about the mistakes that any builder or renovator or homeowner or business owner wanting to build that they should avoid when they design their addition. So you can get your free copy of that report. It's free of charge, and it's full with information that will help you. We have a bigger message which has to do with protecting the environment, protecting the earth, because this is, you know, this is the only source of life, and for future generations we should maintain it, we should take care of it in order to present the future generations with a good conscience and good circumstances that they would be able to live in. Thank you very much for watching.